So, Emma Watson was here for 2 years in Cadiz, 2017 to 2018. I'm sorry, to 2019. Just finished your university degree. Tell me what you studied again. You studied Spanish language, Spanish culture, literature.
So I did a general BA in Spanish and then another BA in English literature.
Oh, wow, so you've got a double BA. All right. And you heard about it through your university because the University of Washington has a connection with the University of Cádiz, right?
Yeah, so I actually heard about it through my advisor when I was in Spain. So I'm not sure if there was a lot of communication back with the home university.
Oh, wait, let's get this straight. You did your Erasmus and you weren't doing the lectora position. You were just here on Erasmus. And
Yeah, well, it's not exactly Erasmus, but essentially I think it's the same thing. So yeah. So when I got to the university and started I was about to start my coursework, that's when I spoke with the director from the University of Cádiz, and they told me about the position, and so that's how I heard about it. Sorry, it's kind of a confusing.
No, that's fine. Okay, so you came here for study abroad, and then through the program you spoke with the person in charge of the lectores in Cádiz, and they offered you the position, like mid-year?
Yeah, basically. It was the beginning of the year, so I think I spoke with him in August of 2017, and then I started teaching in September.
Oh, okay, so they kind of had you identified as somebody that could do the program, that could do the position rather, because you came from the United States.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about this position, like from the past, like how it used to be filled or anything?
I'm not too. I know that every year there are some changes. For instance, between 2017 and 2018, I think they recategorized the program as kind of a scholarship through the government. So the qualifications changed a little bit for it, and the process for applying changed. So I was also kind of I got into the program in a little bit of a different way than I think most people do, because I was already there, and I just had like a personal interview with the director, and that's how I got the position. So I think it was a little bit more casual in terms of their selection process. And then in 2018, I had to officially apply for it via the UCA website, and then there was a panel. They assigned certain numbers of points to each candidate and selected them based on that process. So I can't really tell you a lot about prior to 2017, but I imagine that it was a little bit different than it is now.
I remember that when I asked you about it at the end of your first year, you were like, well, I'm not really sure what documents, and it all sounded sort of airy to me. I was wondering why. Now I know why. It wasn't like a formal application process. I see. So tell me about what you did as a lectora. I mean, what was it like? Typical day, a week, month, school year for you like?
Yeah. So the program gives you 12 hours of teaching in the classroom. That doesn't include any prep time or office hours, which I think office hours are 2 hours a week. So just being available to students. So 12 hours of classroom time, and basically at the beginning of the year, you're given the materials for that semester for every class that you're teaching. The number of different classes that you teach varies depending on the department you're in, and the facultad, and how many other lectures they are and how they divvy it up. So I think that isn't always the same, but you'll get materials for every class and section that you're teaching, and then those are basically like the outlines of what you need to cover, and then you can kind of take that and adapt it. That also depends a lot on how much freedom you have. Depends on the department and the individual faculty member that you're working with that's overseeing the class. So sometimes that means that you can kind of design the curriculum almost from scratch, and sometimes it means that you're basically following a pretty strict outline that they've already made. The classes were usually about an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes. So technically they're 2 hours, but usually instead of having a break in the middle, the students will opt to get out a little early. And yeah, there were a lot of vacation days as well. I think I was usually teaching maybe 3 to 4 days out of the week. And you get breaks during Semana Santa and a lot of other holidays like that. So the course load isn't, I wouldn't say it's heavy at all. For me, in my experience. I know it varies a lot depending on the faculty and your department.
And then the second time, when you had to reapply, was it a paper application? Was it electronic?
It was electronic, and it was through the alumnados.uca.es website, and that's where you find the link for the application and basically do everything electronically. I think you can also turn it in paper if you're near an office that can accept that. Just with respect to the curriculum and kind of what an average day looks like, I did just want to say, I think my experience is a little bit unique again in the amount of sort of like the workload that I had. I do have a friend who was teaching in a different faculty her first year, and her experience was a lot different than mine. I think she was not only teaching, but she was creating the curriculum from scratch, which we also did a little bit in my faculty, but not to that extent. So she was designing each class, and she also had to meet or submit every day her lesson plans prior to the lesson, and then write, I think, a 2 to 3 page summary of the lesson afterwards for each class. So I think her workload was more in the range of 25 to 30 hours a week, and it was a lot more involved than what I was doing. So I think it does vary quite a bit depending on who's overseeing you and in which department.
Was she an English language assistant or English lectora or?
Yeah, so she had the same position as me, but she was just in a different department.
Okay. What about the second time that you applied, when you did it electronically? Do you remember how long from the time that you submitted until you were accepted?
I think it was about 3 to 4 months. So
Long time.
yeah, they didn't tell me definitively that I had the position until I think maybe like a month before the classes were starting, if I remember correctly.
When you first arrived, what would you say were the immediate challenges?
So for me personally, I think that housing wasn't a problem for me when I first arrived because I'd set that up prior. I do know a lot of people who came into the program who kind of hit the ground and had to hit the ground running, and it was difficult for them to find housing. So I think that potentially would be a challenge. For me, I think the biggest challenge was setting up a bank account and getting my NIE, which is a número de identificación extranjero, and kind of navigating that process. And you can't open a bank account if you don't have a NIE, but the NIE process is pretty long, and it's a lot of red tape, basically.
Yes, it is. Like everything is insane. Did you enjoy the experience of being a lectora?
I did. Yeah, it was really interesting. I feel really lucky to have had the opportunity to to have teaching experience without prior experience. And the individuals that I worked with in the department I was in were really lovely, really supportive. The program, at least when I was there, wasn't very, I think it was pretty new in some ways, so there weren't really designated people to kind of oversee it. So in that sense, I feel like it was pretty disorganized in a lot of ways, which could be stressful in terms of, if you're arriving to the country for the first time and you don't know when you're going to get paid or when you start or where your materials are. I think that's a lot easier to navigate if you have already been in the country and you already have a stable living situation. But if you're a little bit hanging out to dry while you're waiting for that information, it can be pretty challenging. So I think there are definitely some flaws, but on the whole, I really enjoyed it. The students were great, and I mean, the city's beautiful, and yeah.
Yeah, we all love Cadiz. Actually, speaking of what you just talked about, that it was sort of disorganized. You say you think it was the first year that they may have done this. I actually heard from another colleague who teaches French and who's doing the lectora position in French in the UCA this year. And apparently, yeah, she started it not this year, last year. And she said that before this, I had asked her the other day, because I'm going to talk to her tomorrow in Spanish about the same thing. She had told me that in the past, they used to use Erasmus students.
Oh, interesting.
But that they weren't fully reliable, for what they were looking for. So they had to now make this exterior position. And another strange thing is that I've looked around other universities in Spain, doesn't seem like they have this position.
Yeah, not that I've seen either.
I wonder how I heard that the University of Malaga fills it by getting their third and fourth year students who've got at least B1 or B2 to be the teaching assistant for the English teacher. Yeah.
Interesting.
Who can apply to it? What are the requisites? And can a non-native do it?
So on the website, I think the general guidelines are having a bachelor's degree. I think they prefer someone with a teaching certificate and being a native speaker of the language that you're speaking. However, at the time, I did not have my bachelor's degree finished, and I also have a colleague, or had a colleague at the time, who was not a native English speaker, who still has the English teaching position. She is fluent, obviously. You wouldn't really know that she's not a native speaker, but yeah. So I think again, it sort of depends on
whether you've got a high enough level in English, maybe if you have a C2 or whatnot. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you feel that were the benefits of the program?
I feel like there were a lot of benefits. I think I learned in some ways to advocate for myself a little bit better through the bureaucratic system. So navigating things that I hadn't really encountered before, or kind of pushing for information in a way that I have never had to before in the States, which obviously is like coming from a pretty privileged position of being a citizen here and not having to deal with that kind of stuff. I think also just the experience of teaching such varying class sizes. So sometimes I had students, maybe I had 2 students in a class, and other times I had 32. So kind of learning how to, and I would never usually know how many students were going to come. So being able to think on my feet pretty quickly and adapt the lesson plans to fit even things like the mood of the students that day, and figure out the best ways to connect with them. I think that learning that was really valuable. and it's definitely something that I feel I can use in a variety of ways outside of the classroom. And in terms of experience too, just having 2 years of teaching experience at a university has been really helpful, I think, in kind of fleshing out my CV, and I think has made me a better candidate for the master's program, for example, that I am in.
Perfect. Well, from the documentation that they've put out now, apparently they've got some benefits. They give you something around 1,000 euros towards perfecting your Spanish or towards a master's. Did you take advantage of any of that?
So I think that worked a little bit better for people who are within the European Union, because which is fantastic. You do have $1,000 toward classes. There are only certain classes that you can use it for. So I think if you're already working on a master's in Spain, it could be really helpful. When I was there, it did have to be Spanish related, so related to the language or the culture. It wasn't super helpful to me because I couldn't transfer those credits back to my home university for a degree. So if I had been there, if I had able to stay longer and started a master's program, then I think that would have been really helpful.
Yeah, 2 years. Okay, and you wouldn't happen to know if that benefit is still available to you? I guess that would be.
Not that I know of. I'm relatively certain that at least when I my last year there, that it was only available through the academic year that you were teaching. But I'm not certain. So
for whom would this program be best recommended? Like in terms of age, in terms of what you study, who would benefit most from it?
Probably an earlier college student might be the ideal candidate, just from seeing different people teach that were teaching in my department or a different faculty through the time that I was teaching. I was able to sort of see who was really enjoying it and who was encountering a lot of problems. So I think that feeling pretty flexible with their time, someone who maybe has a little bit of financial stability already. Sometimes payments from the university can be delayed. I think when I was there, mine was delayed for 3 months, which can be difficult if you don't have another source of income and you're still expected to work and do transportation and everything. If someone is looking for just kind of an opportunity to get to the country or a certain area and feels pretty adaptable in encountering different situations that kind of call for adaptability, and someone who feels pretty comfortable speaking with large groups, I think it's a really good fit. I definitely did enjoy it too, for sure.
I'm sure there's lots to learn in that job. I mean, having the university experience and not having all of the responsibility, but rather being an assistant to the teacher, it must be very educational, to say the least, right?
Yeah, definitely. Very educational.
Have you looked into any other English teaching assistant position, like this one, the North American Language and Cultural Ambassadors? Is that something that you're interested in pursuing to return, or are you looking more for something different?
I would really like to find a job that is a little bit more competitive or has more room for growth.
And just out of curiosity, since you finished your bachelor's, now you're pursuing your master's, have you looked into at all any of these scholarships that might be available to you for study or working abroad? I mean, I was just doing some research the other night and I found that there's a scholarship called a Fulbright scholarship where you can work as maybe doing doctoral assistance, but they also have this other position of English teaching assistants. Have you heard of this? Is this something that would also interest you?
Yeah, definitely. My university is actually pretty gung-ho about the Fulbright.
Mhm.
It's also one of the most competitive scholarships. So it's definitely a process to kind of get your application ready, and it's definitely something that I'm interested in. I think ideally I would apply for that in my second year of my master's, because you do have to be finished with your degree by that time.
Okay, right.
Yeah, but it's an amazing scholarship.
It's something, it's a very strong point to have on your resume, is
Yeah.
what I heard. Yeah. Mhm. Wow. Well, thank you very much for sharing all of that wonderful information.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I'm sure other people who are interested, especially Americans who are interested in coming to Spain for the first time, will find it really helpful, because it would just be really nice to see, to make this opportunity known to other Americans who maybe are
Yeah.
thinking of learning Spanish, of becoming a Spanish teacher, of working
Yeah.
with the Spanish language. It's just a great way to get your feet wet into another country. I think you
Yeah.
might agree with me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Emma. We were just speaking with Emma Watson about the lectora position in the University of Cádiz, and we learned a lot of things about it, how to apply for it, who's eligible, and what to expect. And I hope it was helpful for all of you who are thinking about coming to Spain and living here for a while, perhaps as well teaching. Hope that it is helpful for all of you Americans who are looking for a way to come to Spain, to live in the language, live in the culture, and maybe do some teaching while you're here, because it is so difficult to work in Europe when you're an American and you haven't got a European background. But this is one of the jobs where you can do that. And if you see the links on the bottom, I will put links to the actual job offer, and my own personal contact information, and my links for how you can get in touch with me. If you have any questions about how to do this job, or about moving to Spain or to Cadiz, please drop me a line. Thanks. Ciao.